Dragon Age Origins is a formative game for me. And I don't want to be dramatic, but it genuinely changed gaming for me forever. It introduced me to a deeper RPG when I was a young teenager, and it pushed me towards playing a type of game that I'd never really played before. I've always loved fantasy. Anything with orcs, goblins, wizards and hunters was right up my alley. I was born in 1998, so having the Lord of the Rings trilogy releasing when I was a kid probably had much to do with this. I adored the films, and to this day, I can't get enough of Middle-earth. So naturally, I was always on the lookout for this kind of experience in game form. And of course, Lord of the Rings had its fair share of amazing games back in the day. World of Warcraft was something that I lost too many hours to, and I even went as far to playing some random Eastern MMOs like 2 Moons. I simply couldn't get enough fantasy. RPGs were also something I was quite familiar with because I was exposed to them at quite a young age. I was watching my dad and brother play JRPGs on the PS1 and PS2, so I always leaned towards them. Now of course you can't talk about fantasy RPGs from the 2000s without mentioning Oblivion, and I loved that game. Well, I loved watching it. Playing it was awe-inspiring, but I genuinely didn't have a clue what I was doing because, you know what? I was only 8 years old when it was released. But as my brain grew a bit larger, and as I delved further and further into the ultra nerdy side of games, there was this game off in the distance that, let's be real, when it came out I was 11. And I wasn't exactly keeping up with the magazines and websites at the time, but it was somewhere there in the background. It was made for me at the right time, and that was Dragon Age Origins. I remember we went to a local shopping centre into Smith's, which is an Irish toy and game retailer, on a random Sunday. There was this game box on the PS3, it had a dragon on it, it had dragon in its name, so I had to have it. Luckily, I did get it. I took it home, started up a dwarf playthrough, and I was mesmerised. You know when you're around that age and you want to be a bit edgy, you want to maybe come across as more mature than you are, so the blood, gore and violence of Dragon Age was perfect for me. And I genuinely fell in love with what would later become my favourite RPG of all time, and part of the reason why I want to return to this game in 2024 is to see if it can still hold that spot. And there was something very unique about Dragon Age Origins, specifically the origin side, because back when I was a kid, I would start up every single RPG multiple times. I couldn't count how many different characters I had made in all of these MMOs I had played. And I did the exact same for Dragon Age Origins, and it meant for years I never actually beat the game. But what it also means is that I rolled almost every single beginning scenario of the game, and I think that's what truly cemented my love for Origins. Most RPGs have some sort of starting thing, you know, the area that introduces you to characters, gameplay, and the world. Bethesda tends to do this quite well, actually, with these great world-building areas like the sewers in Oblivion or the Vault in Fallout 3. And while they are great, no RPG has ever done it as well as Dragon Age Origins. You can choose between 3 different races, and the thing about it is that regardless of what race or background you choose, Dragon Age Origins does the thing that I feel a lot of other fantasy games fail to do. It introduces you to the lore of the world almost immediately. If you start as a Dalish elf, you very quickly learn of their life out in the wilds, how they lived off the land, how they hide in the shadows away from humans who discriminate against them endlessly. If you choose a city elf, you learn about how tough their life is in the slums of the capital city, and once again, they're being mistreated by the humans. This all plays a part in the later quests where you might be able to use your knowledge of the Dalish way of living to influence somebody in a quest, or even just get a unique piece of dialogue that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. Even though these opening sections only last like 2 hours tops, they set the stage and the pace of what is to come, and it's the best thing that Origins does. The introductory Dalish section took me just about an hour to beat, but they managed to squeeze in some high quality lore into it so that it felt worthwhile. And it also sets the stakes high, because after no joke like 15 minutes they just ramp up. My party member went missing, we got fecked over by some mirror, and then Duncan appears, which sets the whole Grey Warden and Darkspawn story off into space. It has such an impactful opening that I got hooked again all these years later. Nowadays, most RPGs feel the need to bloat. If you take something that is more of an open world RPG like the recent Assassin's Creed games, they have long stories, loads of characters and some dialogue options, but they never feel urgent. And if I'm being honest, it was one of the reasons that I kind of fell off RPGs for a while. Whether they be true RPGs like Dragon Age or this new amalgamation of open world and RPGs like Assassin's Creed, I feel the majority don't respect your time. And it's not even just leveled at Western RPG or even middling games. I played Yakuza Like a Dragon earlier on in the year, and I adore that game. It might be my favourite JRPG of all time. But even that game falls into the trap of amazing pacing at the start, then it wants to arbitrarily lengthen the game so it gives you some of these boss fights that force you into grinding, and it annoyed me so much. And grinding is something that specifically most JRPGs do, But regardless, this grind shows up in so many RPGs in different ways, where it might be level gating like in some of the Assassin's Creed games, or in the case of later on Dragon Age Inquisition, you just have to level up your power by doing menial tasks. It just creeped its way into RPG game design. And even though there is no actual time pressure in Origins, it feels like there is. And it propels you forward in a way that not many other games do. It respects your time by not giving you a load of crap to do. Like, I did some side stuff and the main story, and I beat it all within like 25 hours. And within that 25 hours, I got an engrossing story and some fantastic characters that I fell in love with. It's simply proof that you don't need a game to be 40, 50, 60 hours plus to get a rich experience. Even this series fell into the trap later down the line with Inquisition. Now, don't get me wrong, I liked Inquisition when I played it back in the day, but it took a bit too much inspiration from the likes of Assassin's Creed or games like that, and it's to the game's detriment because I love the combat and characters, but Jesus Christ, I don't like walking around the hinterlands checking shit off a list. It removed all the urgency that Origins had, and it made the game significantly weaker as a result. BioWare are the masters of companion characters. Over the years, I've played a lot of their games, and each one of them have a few standouts that I can still remember even after years of not playing them. I mean, I'm not even a massive fan of Mass Effect because sci-fi just isn't my thing, but even there I can remember Varric and Miranda, and I haven't played them games in years. And here in Dragon Age Origins they are genuinely phenomenal. I'd have to start with dog because, well, it's a dog. And when I played this game for the first time, I didn't have a dog. I didn't get a dog till I was 18. So any chance I had to have a pet in the game, I was doing it. And I remember starting as a human noble and you're given the dog straight off the bat, and I just loved having them in my party. And then you get into the ones that can actually speak, and I have to have Morrigan and Alistair in my party because their constant back and forth is brilliant.
Ah, so you have finally decided to rejoin us, have you? Falling on your blade in grief seemed like too much trouble, I take it.
Is my being upset so hard to understand? Have you never lost someone important to you? Just what would you do if your mother died?
Before or after I stopped laughing?
Right, very creepy. Forget I asked.
In the world of Dragon Age, Templars hunt mages, and as a Templar, Alistair has a natural disdain for Morrigan. And Morrigan has a disdain for almost everybody, and they're constantly going back and forth over it. And you know what I love the most? They speak like medieval fantasy characters. Something that I'm worried about in Veilguard, since one of the trailers was very Marvel-esque, but we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. I'm sick and tired of Marvel writing creeping into absolutely everything, and you know what else? I'm also sick and tired of criticising games for it, because it just feels like I'm almost just throwing it in as a line and I don't really have much more to say. Because when I can smell Marvel writing, I know it's there and I just can't look past it. But Dragon Age Origins was pre-MCU, so none of that has creeped its way in here. The best thing about the companions though is a romance option. Something that 9-year-old me didn't know was a thing, and I mean, for good reason. I probably shouldn't have known. Also, I probably shouldn't have been playing this game, because this game is extremely mature. This time, I chose to romance Morrigan. And if you don't know how that turns out, then, well, you're in for a treat, just like I was. So I was being smooth all game, giving Morrigan gifts, giving her the odd smooch here or there, and I wondered why I wasn't given a prompt to take the relationship further. And right before the final battle, this happens. The whole goal of the Grey Warden is to kill the Archdemon, but the person who delivers the final blow dies. But Morrigan had other ideas. She came up with a plan, and she said that she does love me, but she can't stay with me. But if we have sex the night before the battle, we can use our unborn child to harvest the essence of the Archdemon, and then I can live, and then she can disappear into the woods and have her own child. And I was absolutely baffled by this. I thought I was being slick all game, but Morrigan was playing 4D chess out here. And now, of course, I did still accept, but I felt quite betrayed. And you will betray different people as you go along. There are even some scenarios where characters will leave your party if you make too many choices that they don't like, and that's brilliant. There's something special about games that have choice and consequences when a developer is willing to make content that you might not even see, or in the case of a party member leaving your party, making your choice have such heavy consequences that a character that you have spent building up, that you have given them gear, you've bought gear for them, you've built your relationship, and then they just feck off from your party. There's something bold about that, and I love it. Another thing I couldn't quite articulate back when I played Origins was how the change of perspective made the game so much more playable, from the standpoint of somebody who didn't grow up or gel with CRPGs. I vaguely remember having some sort of CRPG on my family PC as a kid, and I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. But the second I started up Dragon Age Origins, I understood what was going on, and it was because of the shift in perspective, but also how well they adapted this style of game to a controller. In my Borderlands 1 video, I discussed how the shift in the camera from isometric to first person made action RPGs so much more manageable to your average player. And I feel Dragon Age is the same for CRPGs. And yes, I know BioWare and Obsidian had other games like this before, but I never owned an Xbox, so I never got to play KOTOR or Jade Empire until much later. And I owe a lot to Dragon Age Origins because I would later go in to dip my toes into Wasteland, Baldur's Gate and Divinity Original Sin, and without Dragon Age, I probably would have never done that. The gameplay itself is a perfect modernization of old CRPGs, and because of that, it was way easier to get into than the likes of Baldur's Gate. You do all the same things like clicking on stuff to interact, auto-attack combat, and, stuff like that. But this time there's a third-person over-the-shoulder camera. And what I love about it is that if you want to, you can zoom the camera out and get the perspective that I'm sure many old-school fans want. And it's best during combat. You can pause to issue commands, and if you zoom out, you get an isometric look at the battlefield, and it gives the combat a really tactical feel. And just like the old CRPGs, Dragon Age Origins is tough. Now, I don't think it's as tough as what I've played of Baldur's Gate, but even on normal difficulty, you have to think about most fights. You have to position your mages and archers away from the fray, you need to use your tank to draw aggro, and that tactical side makes party building even more important. Ideally, in Origins, you will have at least 2 mages, but I don't like playing as a mage, so I played as a dual-wield warrior who fought alongside Alistair to deal a lot of damage. My main party was Alistair as a tank, Morrigan as a hybrid healer/DPS, Leliana as an archer, and myself as a hard-hitting dual-wielding warrior. And this party is by no means optimized for combat, but I just like the choice for story reasons. I'm used to turn-based games. I grew up watching them and eventually moved on to playing them when I got a bit older, and I still love the traditional turn-based JRPGs, but the majority of them are missing some extra element in combat. It's probably the reason why Final Fantasy XII is one of my favourites, because it gives you that slight bit more interactivity that most JRPGs miss. So even though I couldn't articulate it back then, I think the younger me finally got that extra element that I was looking for, and now playing it in 2024, it can feel a bit slow, I guess, and slightly unimpactful, but the strategy, character builds, and tactics are all still there, and there's just something to pausing the combat and treating it like a game of chess. You move your mage to use an AoE ability, you pull your archer away so they don't get caught in the blast, and then issue a healing command on your 2 melee characters because you know they'll take damage from the AoE spell, but it's just a risk you're willing to take. And then you get into the builds, which this time I was quite boring because on this playthrough, I didn't stray from the normal warrior build, but I remember when I bought this game on PC probably like 10 years ago, and I followed a guide to build an arcane warrior, and this is a heavy armor wearing mage, and even the journey to unlock the specialization is something I still remember to this day. And once you finally get the specialization and the gear, you're ready to build an absolute monster. And it's just why Dragon Age Origins is perfect for so many different replays. Not only do you have the origins that make the start of the game so much different, you also have so many different companions that you could choose from. Again, I went with the boring options for this playthrough, but there's so many other companions I could have chose that would have drastically changed the story. So there's just so much replayability on this game, so that every single time I've gone back to it since my first playthrough, I've just had an amazing time. I went into this playthrough to challenge myself, to see if Origins really is as great as I remember, and if it'll hold the #1 spot on my RPG list. And I have to say, I adore Dragon Age Origins. I adored it back when I played it on PS3, and I adored it on my second time playing through on the PC, where I discovered the intricacies of finding the Arcane Warrior build and truly getting to know the game's mechanics. And I adore it even more now because of how tight it is. No minute is wasted. You're either exploring a dungeon with some tough combat, or you're exploring a city with deep lore and loads of quests, or you're building your relationship with one of the amazing companions. The story is intense, and it gives you beat after beat after beat. I put about 25 hours into Dragon Age Origins in 2024, and very few games, even today, will give me as much of a great game in that time frame. Now, the series does go downhill from here. I tried to play Dragon Age 2 for a video, but I just gave up. There was nothing compelling me to stick with the game. And I just started Inquisition, a game that I remember liking, and so far, I'm enjoying it, but we'll see how that shapes out after 30 or 40 hours. That video will hopefully be out before Veilguard. So I appreciate every one of you watching this video, and if you've made it this far, I would also appreciate if you sub to the channel for loads of more RPG content, because this month is RPG heaven. We have Metaphor ReFantasio that is either just about to come out when you see this video, or is already released. And then of course, at the end of the month, the whole reason why I'm playing through the Dragon Age series, Dragon Age Veilguard is coming out. Fingers crossed BioWare will redeem themselves. I hope they will. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.